Texas, and I'm also the regional lead for the state of Texas for the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you very much for coming out today. We have a number of expert speakers, and I'm so excited to introduce them all to you today. And I just want to encourage each one of you to ask questions. As I was just saying to Dr. Weiss, we are dealing with a disease that has more questions than answers, but today you're going to be seeing a lot of experts who are going to be able to answer a lot of those questions for you. So please take advantage of them being here today. And we have a number of resources, our great partners in our community who have a lot of information for you, so please take time to stop off at each one of our sponsor tables. And I quickly want to introduce one of those sponsors. It's Dr. Menick, and he is from STRIC, South Texas Radiology Imaging Center. And Dr. STRIC is going to talk to you for a few minutes about what they do there.
So let's jump right into this. I'm Barry Menick. I'm a radiologist, part of the STRIC Imaging Network. And we have on the screen 3 of the major pathologic proteins that account for 4 of the most common neurodegenerative syndromes. We have the sticky amyloid plaque that disrupts cells' ability to communicate with one another. We have the neurofibrillary tangle that causes networks to break down. And we have the Lewy body, the nuclear inclusion that attacks the dopamine pathway. So scientists have discovered that amyloid deposits in the brain for years before patients become symptomatic, first starting in the cortex, spreading to the limbic system, and then affecting the deeper subcortical structures. Other scientists have worked out that the tau protein, the tau tangle, deposits in kind of a centripetal pattern, starting in the centrifugal pattern, starting in the entorhinal cortex, spreading to the limbic system, and then outward along the default mode network to cortical structures. And we know from investigation that these proteins accumulate for decades before you have an imaging abnormality and before you start to have symptoms of impaired cognition. So here's an actual patient's PET scan with late-stage Alzheimer's disease, and we can see the downstream effects of this pathologic protein deposition. And these proteins, the amyloid and the tau tangles, cause degeneration, which manifests itself by diminished activity in certain parts of the brain. The characteristic parts of degeneration are the default mode network, and later the cortical structures of the frontal lobe. The alpha-synuclein protein affects the dopamine pathway. The dopamine pathway is responsible for controlling movement, and degeneration of this pathway causes problems with dopamine production, dopamine storage, dopamine reuptake in the cell, from the cell membrane. And at STRIC, we use a test called a DAT scan. A DAT scan is a measure of the endpoint of the dopamine pathway, the basal ganglia. And what we can do with the DAT scan is we can differentiate patients with Alzheimer's disease who have intact dopamine pathways from patients with Parkinson's disease and Lewy body dementia who have disrupted and degenerated dopamine pathways. So, in summary, by understanding the pathologic proteins that are involved in these degenerative syndromes, the amyloid beta plaque, the tau tangle, and the Lewy body made of alpha-synuclein, we can devise imaging algorithms to differentiate these causes of cognitive decline on a molecular basis. Thank you very much.
As you can tell, in our community, we are blessed to have some really great experts, and Dr. Menick is definitely one of them. So take advantage of him being here today. The STRIC table is right over here. And again, please ask questions. I've had a number of people come up to me today and congratulate me on putting on this event. I would love to say I did all the work on this, but to be honest, I did absolutely nothing. I have an amazing team at my office. Jenny Funk, wherever you are, she's just one of the most amazing staff members you can ever have, and her team, Brett, Casey, I'm just really lucky to have them. But also the committee we had was really outstanding and did so much work to put this on. And I'd quickly like to introduce Helen Flores, who is our chair for the summit, and one of the hardest working people in our community. So, Helen, go ahead.
Thank you. Boy, we got that started early for you, right? Do you totally understand how the brain works now? We gave you brain food this morning, so I'm confident it will sink in. Well, thank you. Good morning. My name is Helen Flores. I'm the Director of Community Relations at Caring Companions, and I hope to be the best volunteer at the Alzheimer's Association. I am a former caregiver of my father who had diabetic-related dementia, so I have walked in the shoes of family caregivers that are here today. But then I've also been in the geriatric care business for about 18 years, and unfortunately, many of the clients that we serve at Caring Companions are struggling with this disease of dementia. So that's one of the reasons why we do what we do here at the Alzheimer's Association, is to be able to help that and be an advocate for that person along their journey of dementia. So there's a few housekeeping rules that I'm in charge of today. I just want to let you know, to your left, if you exit out the doors, are the restrooms, both male and female. And did everybody sign in at registration as you came in the foyer? Yes. Good. I see some red bags on the table. I just wanted to bring your attention, the contents inside your bag, because I wanted you to have an agenda of the day. So if you take out our program, it tells you how the day is going. And of course, there's some visuals there of all the sponsors that are here today that help us put this together, and we'll be highlighting them throughout the day. I also wanted you to know that there's an advocacy card inside that red bag, and it's so important to us at the Alzheimer's Association that you fill out that advocacy card. We send it to our elected officials, and we're just reminding our elected officials that, listen, Alzheimer's research and other dementia research is important to us. And so we are collecting those advocacy cards, and you'll see that we have some buckets up front here for you to drop your card in. I'm going to be talking about that throughout the day, so just do me a favor and fill out your advocacy card, okay? We also have some tremendous supporters here to help this event come through. And as you can see, the vendors throughout the room and also the vendors out in the foyer area, you have a vendor bingo card. Does everybody see their bingo card? So we ask that you stop by each table and spend about 6.5 minutes. No, I'm joking. Only if you're interested. And talk to the people. Ask them why they decided to sponsor this educational summit. Learn about their business, because what we wanted to have for you is some of those support services that are right here in our own community. So that vendor bingo, that each participant will put their name on there. Once you fill out your bingo card, then you bring that bingo card back up here to the purple bucket, the dark purple bucket, and we're doing door prizes. Every sponsor today brought a door prize for you to have and enjoy. Okay, so I just wanted to remind you about your vendor bingo. Every year, we work on this educational summit, and it's a work in progress. We start out in about November to be ready for you in June. Excuse me, we're still in May. But I wanted you to know we're looking at changing the time frame of our summit next year, so keep your eyes out. We're going to switch it to the spring, early spring, maybe February, March time frame next year. So we're trying to spread it apart from all the other events that we have, so I just wanted you to know we're already working on that, and I'm excited to tell you that we have confirmed our keynote speaker for next year. So once we have that date in place for our summit next year, I'll get that information out to you. So I think I have the best committee of volunteers that have helped us organize and gather and get our sponsors, get our speakers, get our CEs available for the professionals, getting breakfast, lunch, and snacks here for you today, and along with the staff that obviously helps us with this. I just wanted to ask our Summit Committee members to stand up for a moment and show your faces, please. Look around the room. When we put on a function like this, it can't be done with just 2 or 3 people, and we consistently have 8 to 10 to 12 people at our regular meetings, and I think that's phenomenal. So I just want to thank the committee that supported this, your dedication, your support, and your willingness to dig into your own pockets to make things happen, and I truly appreciate that. So without further ado, I would like to go over our first speaker today. And again, throughout the day, we're going to give you some updates on what's going on, not only with the day, but our speakers and our sponsors. However, you may recognize this gentleman as a popular and well-loved researcher here in San Antonio. And he has been such a wonderful supporter for the Alzheimer's Association. As a former employee about 15 years ago, I remember Dr. Weiss coming to the Alzheimer's office to help us understand this new medication coming into FDA approval in the United States. And he wanted to make sure that we at the Alzheimer's Association knew how this chemical pathway worked with a galantamine derivative. And I never forgot that. You really don't see physicians coming out often, some do. But Dr. Thomas Weiss, who is of Radiant Research, he's a geriatric-psychiatrist, has been a wonderful supporter to the association. So before I review his background, I just wanted to say I didn't forget that, and I appreciate what you do for us in San Antonio and worldwide. Do you remember that? Oh, I got to work on his memory. Okay. Dr. Thomas Weiss has a private practice in San Antonio, Texas. Dr. Weiss primarily treats patients with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, attention deficit disorder, depression, anxiety disorders, to include post-traumatic stress disorder and obsessive compulsive disorders. He is also affiliated with Radiant Research San Antonio and has participated in numerous studies as the principal investigator across a wide range of innovative treatment options. Dr. Weiss earned his medical degree from the University of Texas Medical School at San Antonio, completed his internship and residency at Wilford Hall, commonly known as Willie Hall here in San Antonio, and did a fellowship training at Harvard University. He is board certified in 4 subspecialties: adult, addiction, and geriatric psychiatry, and psychosomatic medicine. And also, you may see some of the online training that mmlearn.org does, and he is a frequent and requested presenter there. So, without further ado, Dr. Tom Weiss.
Helen neglected to mention that I got a kayak badge in the Boy Scouts, so I wanted to share that. Thank you for coming out today, because I know most of us here in San Antonio are in deep mourning about our Spurs. So it's wonderful that you took the energy to come today. But thanks very much to the Alzheimer's Association for inviting me to do this, because I've been meaning to do this for a while. And as my wife can tell you, I'm really a terrific procrastinator. And when I say meaning to do this, try to sort of make sense of this vast, encyclopedic research effort that's now really ginned up in our country. I've mentioned a couple times in this past week, as I began to put this together, I didn't do what I usually do, which is I usually plagiarize things. I actually tried to construct this And as I did this, I discovered it's like trying to get a drink of water at a fire hydrant. And then, one more metaphor, and I won't torture you anymore. The only way I figured out I could do this is the way we eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So I'm just going to present some information to you for your digestion, but it really is the tip of the iceberg, and I think we'll probably all leave with far more questions than answers, but that's always a good thing. So, I must thank Nina from Morningside Ministry. She's here in the back. She's just a splendid audio-visual genius. My slides are about 4th grade primitive, and she upgraded them, so God bless her. So I'm done with this very lengthy introduction, although one last thing. You all remember Larry Fortensky, right? Larry Fortensky? He was Elizabeth Taylor's 8th husband. So it's rumored that as he went to the boudoir on their honeymoon eve, as he walked into the bedroom where Liz awaited him, it's rumored that he said, I know what to do, I'm just not sure how to make it interesting. So we'll see if we can head in that direction. So kind of a curious title, where are we? Where are we going? You might say this is something you might hear from someone with memory impairment. I'm 65 now, and my wife teases me that sometimes I make these statements, but it seemed like a good way to break this talk up into 2 parts. Where are we, and where are we going? So we'll fire away, and we'll begin with some notions that we hear every day in our media culture. You know, the only way to diagnose Alzheimer's disease is by brain biopsy. Anyone here want to volunteer to have a brain biopsy? The great news is, this is now a myth. At one time it wasn't. I mean, and if we get real technical, we would probably say that brain biopsy is very definitive and very diagnostic. You're actually looking at tissue with these misfolded proteins. But finally, after decades, you know, we've been able to kind of put together now with the classic 1,000-year-old history from the patient and the caregiver by the physician, physical exam, blood work, paper and pencil testing, imaging. That was a fantastic display by Dr. Menick, forgive me, in terms of imaging. And now we can add another component, which is genetics. So if you kind of put that equation together, we can be very, very close to being specific and sensitive about this diagnosis. So it's no longer the only way of diagnosing Alzheimer's dementia by brain biopsy. It's an old way, but luckily we've got better methods. Hallelujah. Myth number 2, Alzheimer's disease is not fatal. So this is a kind of a new revelation out of Rush University in Chicago. And it's sort of good news, bad news. So I guess the good news would be we've really made some incredible strides in the last 40, 50 years. I mean, 50 years ago, as we all grew old, we probably feared dying from stroke or heart attack. Well, looky here, we've been able to, these are negative numbers in terms of changing the cause of death. So we put a big dent in stroke, big dent in heart disease, big dent in cancer, big dent in dying from diabetes. What's not on here, what would eclipse, would be over here in the 52% knockout range, is a big dent in HIV disease. HIV disease. Remember when Magic Johnson disclosed he was HIV positive in 1992? I thought he was a goner. Magic Johnson's alive and well. So we've taken HIV disease, a terminal illness, and we've made it a chronic condition. So this is all great news, modern first world medicine. But here's the bad news. As we now go back and look at death certificates in terms of cause of death, Alzheimer's dementia is just logarithmically skyrocketing. Usually the cause of death, or historically I should say, has been aspiration, pneumonia, or sepsis. But we also know that as this brain failure disease accelerates, the brain stops sending signals to breathe, for the heart to beat. Shutdown. So Alzheimer's disease is very much, oh my goodness, very much a myth in terms of not fatal. Number 3, Alzheimer's disease, is that disease reserved for the elderly? Well, it's partially true. The biggest risk factor is advancing age. But as I'm sure you all know, there are other forms of Alzheimer's dementia. One form that really has our attention now is sort of the familial early onset autosomal dominant. It's very rare, thank goodness, but it manifests its symptoms when people are in their 30s and 40s. Here's a family in America. You'll notice that perhaps there's really only one person here that looks a wee bit mature. But all of these folks, with the exception of one, have this gene. And some of them are, as we look at them today, are quite symptomatic. So the disease of the elderly, for the most part, but not solely. And in fact, those folks that have early onset, they might be the patients that guide us to better treatment, as I hope to explain. So this one, what's that expression? Desperate times call for desperate measures. So we're all desperate for a cure, because at 65, like the Johnny Cash song, I see that train a-coming. It's coming down the line. My mom died of the disease when she was 75. My father died of the disease when he was 90. My sister, 75 now, she has moderate Alzheimer's disease. So I think a lot about my next 10 years. And gee whiz, I'm saying my rosary every night for a cure. But off to the side here, you see it everywhere in the media. And it grabs us, it grabs me. 5 o'clock news, a new cure has been developed for Alzheimer's dementia. How many times have we all heard that? And how many times have we all bit? And how many times are we going to bite on it in the future? I'm going to bite on it every time. Because this is coming right at us. But we don't have a cure. This is, as we sit here, incurable. Now, here's just kind of the good news. There's a lot of diseases that are incurable. The last time I checked, diabetes is incurable. Hypertension is incurable. Those are chronic, very common illnesses. But we've got magnificent treatments and interventions that allow patients with those incurable illnesses to lead long, high-quality lives. So, myth, no cure today. That's why we're all here. What's the future look like? And number 5, now this one's kind of, I feel a little hypocritical, because as I grab my cup of coffee tomorrow, I took my 2 omega-3s, my 81 milligram baby aspirin, my vitamin D, 2,000 units, and my 200 milligrams of magnesium. Been doing that for I don't know how long. But I think this is a language piece. Taking supplements can prevent the progression of Alzheimer's. So as the nuns taught me in Catholic elementary school, you have to really zero in on your language, Thomas. So we've got prevent. I think taking supplements, certain supplements, can reduce the risk, but that's different from prevent. Not trying to rain on anybody's parade. So we've got some misconceptions up on the board, just kind of warming us up, get us thinking. Always have to start off with a definition or I'll be struck down by a Jesuit lightning bolt. I was trained by Jesuits. So here's the definition. Alzheimer's disease. You know, we make a lot of jokes about Alzheimer's dementia because when you think about it, we make jokes about things we fear, like death and taxes. But so you know, we have that what's Alzheimer's disease? It's a CMS disorder. Well, it is a memory disorder, but here's what I want you to zero in on with me. It's progressive. You know, there's a dreadful neurologic illness, multiple sclerosis. There's a progressive multiple sclerosis, that's bad. And there's one called relapsing and remitting, which is not so bad. You have periods of no disease followed by periods of relapse. Not so with Alzheimer's dementia. This is progressive. It marches on relentlessly. Neurodegenerative, a $10 word meaning the neurons slowly but surely die. Okay? And it's characterized by two components. Component one is chronic memory disorder. We've all had episodic memory disorder. Maybe we're worried about someone in our family, or we're worried about our job, we're worried about money. You know, maybe it's a day or a week, but this is chronic. And in my world, as a geriatric-psychiatrist, we define chronic as greater than 6 months, okay? So that's part one. So it's progressive, neurons are dying, and it's manifested by chronic memory problems and difficulties. Now, these are the 3 A's from the world of neurology: aphasia, agnosia, apraxia. I'll translate for you. Aphasia is problems with language. Agnosia is problems with recognition. Apraxia is problems with motor. But I'll make these personal, okay? So I saw my mom 2 weeks before she passed away. I'm her only son. She didn't know my name. She didn't know who I was, and I really couldn't comprehend that. So she had agnosia. I flew home last night back to San Antonio, and I remember the airline attendant says, "Here's how you buckle a seatbelt." And I always kind of take umbrage at that. But for someone with severe Alzheimer's dementia, this motor function is Herculean. And then language. I mean, isn't that what distinguishes us from the animal kingdom in many ways? How we communicate? So here it is, progressive. So it's relentless, it's killing neurons, and this is how it presents. And then, oh, gee whiz, I forgot the most important thing. Everybody that's sitting here today, an hour ago, you got here via executive function, which is a fancy term for planning. Got to get to the Alzafar shrine. Where the heck is that place? Sequencing? How am I going to get there? I'll take I-10 over to 1604. Wait, street's blocked off. I've got to now alter my plan. So this is executive function, planning, sequencing, being able to shift sets, and completing. And we do executive function 24/7 automatically. But this disease absolutely destroys it. And then, of course, the sine qua non of any illness is these symptoms have to result in either occupational or social problems. I think that that's self-evident with Alzheimer's dementia. The most common question that I get as a geriatric psychiatrist is Alzheimer's disease a dementia? And the simple answer is dementia is an umbrella term, like pneumonia is an umbrella term for an infection of the lung. And of course, there are different types of pneumonia, viral, bacterial, fungal. So dementia is an umbrella term, and Alzheimer's is one of a number of dementias. There's 4 that are fairly common. Alzheimer's is the most common, the most likely. Okay. These other dementias, as you can see, have a wide variety of causes. And given those causes, we have a lot more knowledge about their pathology and the mechanism of action and treatment. I mean, if you have a vitamin B12 deficiency that causes a memory disturbance, we can fix that pretty quick. It's relatively reversible. We don't know fully the cause, and I don't think there is a cause of Alzheimer's dementia. I think there are many vectors, many causes. That's what we seem to be learning. But right now, this particular theory, called beta amyloid cascade hypothesis, is still holding on, although its grip has recently been lessened. And again, we know very specific things about Alzheimer's dementia, from diagnosis to death on average 8 to 12 years. This is a disease that, generally speaking, we see as we age 5% in folks that are 65 years old, and then it doubles every 5 years, or 10% in 70-year-olds, 20% in 75-year-olds, 40% in 80-year-olds. Other dementias have a wide variety of ages. And then symptomatology. So, where are we right now? We know a lot about risk factors. And you always have to separate risk factors into those that we can't do a dang thing about today versus those that we can do something about right now. So I kind of broke it down into, immutable risk factors. Can't change aging, although we all wish we could at many points in our life. Okay? Can't change the genes that our parents were kind enough to pass on to us. And, well, maybe I should pause about this, but we certainly can't change how we entered this world, okay? And you might say, well, what are you getting at here? We think gals, more so than guys, are maybe at greater risk. It may have something to do with hormonal protection that disappears with menopause. This is one of the few conditions where women are more at risk than guys. But here's where we need to zero in. What can we change? What can we do right now? Okay? So these are all modifiable, and I know you hear these messages all the time, and I'll be brief. We think that if we sit, we rust. Not just our heart, but our brain. So move. Education. So this is interesting and getting more interesting. We think that as we continue to learn throughout our lifespan, that maybe we build up, they call it in the field, cognitive reserve. And perhaps this provides us some protection. The way I think about it is not much of a computer guy, but I know my little computer has a hard drive. So that's my brain. If I have a brain disease, a brain failure disease, my hard drive is starting to fall apart. Well, golly, I get one of those little flash drives and insert it in the computer. I'm up and running. So cognitive reserve that we create via education maybe provides us some protection. Isolation. I'll talk about this at the tail end of this presentation, but we're actually now beginning to see loneliness as a treatable condition. someone has kind of coined the idea that loneliness is now the new smoking. And we know that folks that, well, of course we know that as we get older, what happens? Our spouse dies, our kids move away, our friends die. I remember vividly a patient gentleman telling me about this, and then he pointed his finger at me and said, "You know what that means, don't you?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "That means you got to get younger friends." But isolation, we know that folks that we actually have a test for isolation, questionnaire. We know that folks that are particularly isolated, they're about 8 times more likely to suffer from Alzheimer's dementia. Tobacco use, well, I'm a doctor, so I'll just say tobacco, no good. But there's lots of reasons why. It's reducing oxygen supply to our brain, reducing blood flow, carcinogens, chronic alcoholism. So in another life, I worked for a number of years in a substance abuse treatment. We would see older people who had long drinking histories and they appeared to be severely demented. Yet remarkably, if and when we were able to detoxify them, we'd see about 50% would have a remarkable return, about 25%, some benefit, about 25%, no change at all. Sleep apnea, of course, this is something that's in our culture and the media all the time. But these are about 2.5 million people in our country that have trouble with getting restful sleep, but it's more than that. They're at great risk for cardiovascular disease, heart attack, and stroke. They're poorly oxygenating their brain. Obesity, I've got a little asterisk there. So again, you can kind of see how several of these sort of tie together: diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, sleep apnea, sedentary lifestyle. There's a new just a little flash study that came out that folks that might be overweight have a higher BMI, but have no cardiovascular disease, are somehow protected from Alzheimer's dementia. Stay tuned for more on that one. And then, of course, cardiovascular disease. What's the old piece that we've all heard? You know, what's good for the heart is good for the brain, and the reverse of that. Diabetes. Well, here we live in San Antonio, where this is epidemic, if you will. And we certainly know that diabetes is an accelerant of Alzheimer's dementia. And actually, there might be some evidence that it may kind of share this bi-directional piece with Alzheimer's dementia. And last but not least, head trauma. I always ask patients, in your lifetime, have you ever suffered any head trauma with a loss of consciousness? Loss of consciousness is critical. Of course, you say, well, how can we modify this? Well, we're seeing it right now. Our kids wear helmets when they ride bikes. I don't remember doing that when I was little. Shame on me. So, where are we now? Pathology. We know a lot about this illness. In fact, Alzheimer wrote this illness up and presented it to his colleagues in Germany in 1906. There's his paper, A Curious Disease of the Cortex. After he presented the information, no questions, no discussion. And here's kind of his history, and this is a convergence of history. Alzheimer's born in 1864, but staining techniques to look at pathology in the brain were invented about 20 years after his birth, and he used those staining techniques to draw impeccable pen and ink reproductions of the culprits of Alzheimer's dementia, the senile plaques and the neurofibrillary tangles. And then he met this woman, 51-year-old woman, Auguste D. She presented to the German hospital with the chief complaint: I have lost myself. She was paranoid. She didn't know who her family members were. She had no memory, was easily lost. He treated her for 4 years. She passed. He sectioned her brain, wrote this up. So lo and behold, what is that, 150 plus years ago. And here's the picture. Forgive the cartoon picture, but I think we can make this say a lot. So what Alzheimer's noticed in 1906, the two culprits, senile plaques. These are embedded within, senile plaques are outside of the neuron, and they set up and they interrupt signaling. So neurons, of which we have 100 billion in our 3-pound brain, they send signals, electrical chemical signals from synapse to synapse. And if these plaques are between these neurons, they interrupt signaling to lay down memory, okay? So he saw that in this 51-year-old lady's brain, these senile plaques that are made out of beta amyloid. And then he also noticed that there were these tangles, neurofibrillary tangles, and they're a different type of protein. This is amyloid protein, tangles are tau protein. And what they do, the bad thing that these tangles do is these tangles destroy mitochondrial tubules that they provide nutrients to the neuron. So this is a double whammy, okay? The plaques outside of the neurons interrupt signaling, and the tangles inside the neurons prevent the neuron from being able to grow and continue. So, diagnosis. How do we diagnose the disease in 2017? Well, we've kind of built this. 20 years ago, this would be lacking many things. So it's the age-old, let's take a history from the patient and from the caregiver, the family member. And we're looking for subjective memory complaints. And then we want to screen the patient with, these are short in-office memory screening devices. The mini mental status exam, the Montreal Objective Cognitive Assessment, the St. Louis University Mental Status, the Alzheimer's Disease 8 Questionnaire. And this kind of gives us a number. It's a screen, it's not diagnosed. Then we're going to do the physical exam. Is there any physical illness that might account for this? Is the patient rigid? Do they have a tremor? Is this not Alzheimer's dementia, but perhaps the dementia of Parkinson's disease? And of course, we're going to do a very thorough round of blood work, the de rigueur, complete blood count, metabolic profile, but we want to look for those reversible dementias. Do they have a vitamin deficiency? Do they have HIV dementia, where the virus is now in the brain? Do they have a thyroid problem that's contributing to this picture? Do they have syphilis? And now we've added a new one, although this is still very rare, but not rare in research, where we actually take a sample of the cerebrospinal fluid, which involves a lumbar puncture. This allows us to measure tau proteins and beta amyloid proteins in the CSF. And it's a marker, a biomarker. And then if the stars in the right alignment and the resources permit, we'll do neuropsychological testing. It takes about 4 hours, but it's very precise. Where are the patient's strengths? Where are their weaknesses in terms of cognition, memory, information processing? So genes, holy cow. This is, I don't remember any of this when I went to medical school with Hippocrates. Genes. So we've been able to identify some genes that certainly really raise the risk of Alzheimer's dementia, and we can actually find them. A big breakthrough, you probably saw it 2 weeks ago. You can now order 23andMe genetic testing. You'll give them a saliva sample, and they'll now come back and they'll tell you about this particular gene here. But these genes, we know presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and Dr. Menick had mentioned alpha-synuclein. They clearly put us at much higher risk for Alzheimer's dementia. And then the apolipoprotein gene, which has, we have two pieces in each one of us. E2 we think is protective, E3 perhaps neutral, and if we have both copies of E4, high risk, not predetermined, not predestined, but higher risk. So another diagnostic tool that we have now, today. Imaging, I won't steal Dr. Melick's thunder, but golly, I grew up in the X-ray days, where we just looked at plain tissue and fluid and bones. So here's a normal, here's an Alzheimer's brain, quite shrunken, atrophied is the operative word. CT scan, better resolution, although I could have picked a better picture. It allows us to look at very specific parts of the brain where we know this illness begins and then spreads. An MRI, so this is a lovely example. Right here in this section of the brain, in this little area, here's a normal and here's an Alzheimer's patient. This is a special area called the hippocampus, Greek for seahorse, because it looks a little bit like a seahorse if you look at the tissue type. And the hippocampus is in our temporal lobe. It's where we process memory, associations. And this is where this disease sets up, in the entorhinal cortex, in the hippocampus. And what we see is this illness progresses is tissue destruction. Look at the volume loss of the hippocampus. So this is on an MRI scan. Painless, quick, relatively inexpensive. PET scan, pretty expensive. This looks at how the brain takes up glucose. And here's this 3-pound organ that uses 25% of our total glucose every instant, okay? And what we know is that with the Alzheimer's dementia, there appears to be problems with glucose uptake in the diseased parts of the brain. Hypometabolism is a fancy word, and this gives us kind of a color picture of normal and a patient with the disease. And then lastly, this is one very recent development, circa 2012. We can now put a radioactive tracer that will lock on to those beta amyloid proteins and give us a picture. It's an enhancement. First, some guys and gals at the University of Pittsburgh developed something called compound P. It lasted about 20 minutes, and then the smart people at Eli Lilly developed a better one that lasted about 110 minutes. And again, this gives us a picture of where these proteins are. So what do we have treatment-wise? Every decade will go diagnosis and treatment. Well, we have 4 drugs that the FDA has approved. I know you're all intimately familiar with them. None of them modify the disease. What they do is they help with the symptoms of the disease. And it's a very quick story. They break into 2 pieces. Aricept, exon-razidine. Their mechanism of action is to increase a dwindling supply of acetylcholine in the Alzheimer's brain. Acetylcholine helps us lay down memory. This was first approved in 1996, 21 years ago. And then a second medicine called Memantine. This works in a different way in the brain. What it does is it modulates a neurotransmitter called glutamate. It's excitatory. That's not a bad thing unless it's too much glutamate and the neurons are overexcited and the cell walls are destroyed and they die. So this modulates glutamate. And you know, this is one of these things, why didn't I think of that? These medicines have all been standalones, and now a year ago they've been combined. So we have Aricept and Memantine in one pill. It seems self-evident, but I think it's wondrous because it's convenient for the caregiver and the patient, and we're getting the maximum benefit. So how about non-pharmacologic interventions for Alzheimer's dementia? Well, I'll be brief here. This is a fairly new discovery, the glymphatic system. We have a lymphatic system from our neck down. You know, our lymphatic system clears out waste products. And you know if it's damaged, the part of our body where the lymphatic system is damaged can be quite swollen because we're not able to clear extracellular solutes out. We never thought that there's no evidence of a lymphatic system in our brain. So how does it clear out waste products? But we now know, as of about 2 years ago, that at night, when we sleep restfully, our brain actually contracts and glial cells, so glial and lymphatic, and it operates as a lymphatic system. And I kind of like this picture. It's little folks vacuum cleaning the brain. And the research piece here is that there's some evidence that if we can make the lymphatic system work more efficiently, maybe we can prevent or delay the onset of Alzheimer's dementia. So there's research in that regard. Exercise, certainly what happens when we exercise, better blood flow, better oxygenation. Diet, I won't dare try and talk with you about diet, but the center of that is diets that are anti-inflammatory. And there's very specific food products that are anti-inflammatory, and there's mental stimulation. So we have little pieces down here. We've got this gentleman exercising and smiling. I never smile when I exercise. We've got this lady eating right, and what a beautiful smile, and then God love her, here's mental stimulation. Of course, the question is, what type of mental stimulation? And as best as we know now, it's new learning. So learning to play an instrument, learning to speak a new language, which is hard. So where are we now? We're almost done. So here's the thing to remember. Genetics loads the gun. You know, our parents gave us what they gave us. God bless them. But how we live pulls the trigger. So if you have some time tonight, take a look-see at blue zones. Here's 5 of them around the globe. One's in California, in Loma Linda, and others down in Costa Rica, one in Italy, one in Greece, and one in Japan. So these are areas where people seem to live very long and live very healthy, very dramatic rates of cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's dementia. So we've decided to study these areas because maybe there's clues. And there are clues. There's common denominators. In all of these places, common denominators are they have a somewhat semi-vegetarian diet. They don't smoke. They're incredibly hardy physically all their life. Physical activity is inseparable from them. They're very connected to family, to spirituality, to social groups. And they like to eat a lot of beans. Couldn't make that up, legumes. So what about a vaccine? Actually, another fascinating story, a vaccine was constructed in 2002 at an experimental number, AN1792. They gave this vaccine to transgenic mice that had the illness. It reduced their plaque and tangle burden. They gave it to 300 human volunteers that had the disease, and 18 of them got dreadfully sick. So that kind of halted those trials. But the beat goes on, and we'll talk more about the vaccine in a bit. So where are we going? That's what you're here for. You said this guy's killed 40 minutes already. Get to it. So I love Yogi Berra. He's just got beautiful expressions. You know, if you get to a fork in the road, take it. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So as my wife would tell you, every prediction I've ever made doesn't come to pass. So take this with a big grain of salt. So where are we going? So first off, diagnosis. We know there's a pre-disease state for Alzheimer's dementia. We call it minimal cognitive impairment. Somehow that doesn't seem right. MCI, okay, so these folks have memory impairment greater than their peers, but they're There's no impairment in function. Yet when you test them with memory testing, there are 2 or 3 standard deviations worse, but they're functioning. They're functioning, okay? So these are the folks we want to look at, because maybe they've got the disease before it really gets rolling. In fact, we actually think that this illness starts 20, 30 years before it actually manifests. So we want to simplify how to measure MCI in the office. We don't have a good way to do that. We also want to look at their genetic risks. So if I can draw your blood and see about these genes, and we're gathering more and more genes, and come up with an equation that kind of puts somebody in high risk, moderate risk, or low risk, that would be helpful. And then maybe we can intervene earlier. So over here is sort of it's kind of complicated, but this is before the patient's symptomatic. BMs are biomarkers. Don't think it's anything else. Okay? So they're biomarkers. So does the patient have biomarkers in their bloodstream or in their CSF? Do they have elevated proteins, those beta amyloid proteins and tau proteins in their bloodstream? Or are they negative? Obviously, if they have biomarkers, they're at greater risk. Okay. And then let's look at their genes. Let's look at their age, genetic factors, other things that are going on. And maybe we can intervene a little earlier, okay? And we now have what I call canaries in the coal mine. You know, the coal miners would take the canary down, so if the canary went down, they knew to get out of the mine with toxic gas. So here's a couple of quick hitters. Cortical thinning. There's some evidence that in very specific parts of the brain, Alzheimer's disease may be diagnosed earlier due to cortical thinning in certain areas. Certainly it's very helpful to differentiate between frontotemporal, lobar dementia, and Alzheimer's dementia. Loss of a sense of smell. This is a little controversial. Wouldn't it be lovely if, as the doctor had us close our eyes and we smell coffee and we smell alcohol swabs if we lost that? It's a bit controversial. Right now, we think there's an association between loss of sense of smell. And remember, this nerve, olfaction, is a direct connection to the brain. So there's an association, but it's not predictive. And this one's very exciting, retinal changes. An ophthalmologist might be able to look in our eye. Again, the optic nerve, a direct connection to the brain. Might be able to see the plaques, might be able to see blood vessel changes. So these are kind of canaries in the coal mine in terms of future diagnosis. Timing is everything. Talked about early onset familial type Alzheimer's dementia. So this poor soul is 40 years of age. These are his sons and daughters. He has early onset. He has severe dementia at the age of 40. He lives in South America. And both of his children have these genes. They will have what he has 20 years hence. So we're realizing that with an awful lot of our studies, we maybe tried medicines far too late in the course of the illness. Timing is everything. So now we're going to look at retrialing drugs that had failed here in cohorts that we've been given the consent to study in South America. So here's a bit of sad news. From 2002 to 2017, 15 years, we've had 316 phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 medicine trial failures. Phase 1 is trials in animal models and first dose in man. Phase 2 is dose finding, small populations that have the disease. And phase 3, big populations that have the disease, we're looking for side effects. So you say, golly, that's incredibly disappointing. No, it's not disappointing. This is all good learning. What doesn't work? We don't need to go down that trail again. This is all grist for the mill, okay? We now are starting to think much more clearly about patient selection. Probably a lot of earlier patients in Alzheimer's trials, they had other complicating factors. So now we want to get an Alzheimer's patient full on. We want to time our intervention earlier, okay? We want to figure out what exactly do we measure besides cognition and activities of daily living. What's important? So the good news, the research engine is just bursting. We're at the red line at RPMs. It's amazing what's in the pipeline, okay? What's even better is awareness. Even better is funding. Thank goodness President Obama, I don't know if you know this, 6 days before he left office, signed an act, $6 billion with the B dollars for medical research, $3 billion for the cancer moonshot, $1 billion for Alzheimer's dementia, the other remaining $2 billion for other neurodegenerative diseases. That's the most funding we've ever had, okay? We're also able to communicate instantly with our colleagues throughout the globe and this incredible collaboration. So it's good news, good news. So immunotherapy, you know, can we develop some sort of antigen? Can we vaccinate for this disease? And these trials are upon us right now. They kind of break down into passive immunity. You know, this is an artificially formed antibody, or active immunity. You know, you have lumps, your body creates a defense. And then IVIG is intravenous immunoglobulin. This is a very powerful external immunotherapy agent. We've got a small group of Alzheimer's patients with moderate to severe disease that get this intravenously directly into their spinal cord, and there's some interesting results in that piece. How about, I need to back up. Went to a wedding 6 months ago, and the bridesmaid said, I'm going to make a little speech, and it has to do with something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. I didn't know what she was talking about. My wife had to educate me, but basically, something borrowed is immunotherapy. Something old is lithium. Lithium's a chemical we've had for 100 years. It's used in psychiatry to treat bipolar illness. It's a mood stabilizer, but really fantastic studies out of Brazil. First in humans, then in animals, which is usually it's much the other way around. First we try a medicine in animal models, then give it to humans. They did it in reverse. Microdosing lithium had fairly dramatic effects in terms of improving cognition and knocking out those bad tau proteins. So something borrowed. So this is the CLASS study, cholesterol-lowering agent, slow progression of Alzheimer's dementia. What a mouthful. This is simvastatin, a cholesterol-lowering agent, a statin. And we think that those misfolded proteins, beta amyloid protein, tau protein, their parent compound is cholesterol. So if we can intervene very early and reduce cholesterol levels, reduce the pool of it, maybe we can reduce the production of these culprit proteins and reduce inflammation. So something old, something borrowed, we had something, and lastly, one more old insulin resistance piece. So I mentioned earlier, our brain runs on glucose. We know that Alzheimer's dementia, these plaques and tangles disrupt glucose metabolism and create insulin resistance. So if we can use existing drugs that we use in diabetes to treat this insulin resistance, perhaps we can attack the disease. So again, something borrowed. And lastly, believe me, I had to reach for this, guys. Something blue here, okay? Methylene blue. This is an old anti-malarial drug. So you notice we take older drugs now and repurpose them, as well as developing new compounds. So methylene blue, kind of fascinating. This also seems to be pretty helpful in reducing plaque and tangle burden. The studies continue. There's a number of sub-studies. And tissue necrosis factors. So we're pretty sure that Alzheimer's dementia is a disease of misfolded proteins, these beta amyloid and tau proteins. But we also know other problems exist, problems with glucose metabolism, problems with inflammation. You can imagine if in between the neurons there are these abnormal plaques, and within the neurons there are these broken down microtubules, that there's an inflammatory process. So we have existing drugs. You've probably heard of Embro. It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory drug used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis. So we're now looking at using a powerful anti-inflammatory for Alzheimer's dementia. Non-pharmacologic, this is exciting news. So the Creator gave us this magnificent instrument, our brain, and lots of protection for it besides our thick skull. One piece of protection is called the blood-brain barrier. These are very tight junctions that pose problems for drug permeability. So it's cancer researcher in Paris decided to use focused ultrasound to get a cancer drug to a very specific part of the brain. We're now starting to do the same thing in delivering our medicines to patients with Alzheimer's disease using ultrasound. Loneliness, okay? This is the UCLA loneliness scale. And in the interest of time, I'll just simply say we've got evidence that loneliness is perhaps a treatable condition. How do you treat it, okay? There's a fantastic organization called CareMore. They've got all sorts of ways to treat it, from phone outreach to visitors, to specialized gyms, to kind of creating a social movement to address loneliness. Non-pharmacologic, I mentioned sleep earlier, the glymphatic system. Here's sort of the connection. We know that when we sleep poorly, particularly slow wave sleep, which we think has a lot to do with cellular repair and aging, that causes inflammation and accelerates beta amyloid deposition, and bang, that starts this piece up. So are there ways to help us sleep more effectively? We're coming to the 5-minute piece. So prevention studies, there are 4 that are up and running. In fact, last night I looked, and 2 of them are closed, even though they need 5,000 subjects. So they're already closed. So here's the 4 studies in prevention, the A4 study. So anti-amyloid treatment in asymptomatic patients. So these are patients that don't have the disease yet. We're trying to treat them way early. The Tomorrow study. So this is looking about prediction via genetic risk, just zeroing in on these 2 genes. The Alzheimer's Prevention Initiative trial, again, they look at patients' ages and genetic background, and they want to pick the folks at highest risk and treat them as quickly as possible. And then the DIAN study, these are those folks that we talked about down in Colombia with early onset disease. We're going to try and treat them when they're in their 20s before the illness manifests in their 40s. Genetic modification. I don't know if you've heard this term, CRISPR technology. It's actually the revolution. This allows us to edit genes in living organisms right now, which sounds a little creepy. Right now they're looking at it in this country in animal models, and in other countries they've already begun to do it in humans. So on the one hand, you might say, well, if we can edit genes in living organisms, maybe we can edit out those genes that put us at greater risk. This is a little bit dreamy, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't dream I'd have a cell phone when I was 12 years old. So funding, I mentioned funding, how wonderful that is, but most importantly, awareness. So HIV disease has come a long way in 20 plus years. Took a terminal illness, made it a chronic illness. Why? Very powerful voice, incredible awareness. We don't have a voice per se, other than the Alzheimer's Association, which is a wonderful voice that's getting louder and louder every day. Patients don't have the voice, that's for sure. But now we've got the awareness, so I'm very optimistic. So here's what I would like you to leave with, the takeaways. We know what doesn't work, and we know when it doesn't work. Might sound kind of ridiculous, but this is important. This is important. You know, we don't want to go down dead-end trails, okay? Keep this in mind when you hear those 5 o'clock sensational news about a new drug in animals. Studies involving animals often fail to produce similar results in humans. They're guides, but they're not always predictive. We've got a much bigger black bag, much bigger toolkit, particularly in terms of imaging, genes, lab values, even testing. And then this is the part I like. We have a real-time, worldwide, this is the Manhattan Project in medicine. This is the Manhattan Project. And everybody's collaborating. So the most important thing I can leave you are the things that I use to kind of construct this resources. I'll leave this up, and I think they're going to make this talk available. So of course, and I'm not trying to be false here. The first 3 or 4 are Alzheimer Association resources, but they're magnificent, and they're 24/7, and you'll talk to a human being. How radical is that? Learn, a magnificent institution here in San Antonio. I asked you to go visit them. They've got an archive of, I think now, 300 videos that are free, available 24/7. The Barshop Institute, that's here in San Antonio. It's an institute looking at longevity and aging at the medical school. Magnificent. And then the Banner Alzheimer's Institute in Las Vegas is really where you can find all the latest research pieces. So, in conclusion, are we there yet? So, I'll leave you with this, all right? So the pandemic, influenza of 1918, killed hundreds of millions and damaged tens of millions. We've got flu vaccines. Then we've got the polio virus, very crippling. I remember polio in the 1950s. Okay. Terrifying, attacked little kids. But luckily, we got Jonas Salk creating a vaccine and saving and improving it, and that scourge disappeared. And then we have HIV. Of late, we have Ebola and Zika, terrifying scourges. But what happens? You know, we put our heads together, we start to crack the code, and we make progress. So I'm very optimistic about the future. Thank you. I'm sorry I went 3 minutes over. I said I was talking too slowly.
You are not. You're not. As always, Dr. Weiss, you are such a wonderful presenter, and one of the reasons we ask him to come back, well, we try every other year, is because he explains on a level that I can understand. I am not academia, and so I just want you to know we appreciate your approach to helping us understand what's coming down the pike. You know, this topic was brought to us by the surveys that you all filled out last year if you attended the summit. We really took a look at those surveys to try to improve this summit for you. And so they wanted, you know, people commented they wanted more research-related topics, and that's one of the reasons why Dr. Weiss is here with us today. So he has to, unfortunately, scoot on out to catch a plane. Well, I'm just going to tell on you. He double-booked himself. And so we rearranged our schedules so that he could still speak, yet be able to catch that plane. But I did want you to know that if you are interested in any of the presentations that you see today, if you will jot this email down, GFUNK, the @ ALZ.org. We try to reduce and help our atmosphere and environment by not printing off all this paper. We'll be glad to email any of the presentations to you today. However, we do have a small token of appreciation. Do not fill these up with white wine, fill them up with red wine, because we need those antioxidants in red wine. So do you have 10, 15 minutes that you can stick around, or do you gotta shoot
Sure.
out?
What I was going to say is, why don't I go in the back? I don't want to interfere with anybody's break. I used to work in a zoo, and they taught me not to get between the animals and so,
Careful, careful.
So I'd like to have your break, but I'll be back at Radiant Research. That's the good folks I work with. This is a shameless plug, but we actually have 2 dementia trials up and running. So I'm happy to take your questions, and I'll be here for the next half hour. So.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss. I appreciate it. So listen, I do have one more thing I want to do. We're about to go on a break, but Marc, could you please come up to the stage real quick? We have a wonderful volunteer who comes back year after year to help us with our audio-visual support. And you know, he does this as a volunteer nature and then edits his filming and puts our films on YouTube so that people have access who didn't get to come today. And you know, sometimes, Marc, we overlook all that you do, but we didn't want to forget you today, and we just want to say thank you. Do not fill that up with white line. So, this is Marc Johnson. If you have any AV questions, he's our man, and always graciously taking pictures and videotaping for all of our events. So I thank you, Marc. Okay, stand up, get the juices flowing. We have a 30-minute, like a 25-minute break.